Okay, welcome to part two of my two-part video presentation on the sequencing of the Battle of the Face on Mars. In this image, we are looking at the entrance lines for Horus and Seth, which I derived through the geometry and symbolism of the mounds of Cydonia, which I'm about to show you. Specifically, I'm talking about these two mounds highlighted in red and green. If one does the geometry right, one will discover that these two tetrahedral mounds not only align with specific sites and markers on the face, the reflections they produce reinforce the assumption that this geometry specifically represents Horus and Seth. And here we have the two reflections that are produced by the entrance of Horus. On the bottom we have the clear image of a heart, which represents Isis again. And on the top, in the middle of this image, carved out of the eye of Horus, is the clear image of a lion. Now, for the sake of argument, we're going to ignore everything I've said in the past and simply assume that all images that arise from the shadow represent Seth, and images that arise from the light represent Horus. So, what we're looking at here are two sphinxes of Seth. And hopefully it will become clear by the end of this video exactly why that is. Our first stop in the sequence will be at the cross at 19.5 degrees, where we meet the face of Horus and the lion face of Seth. The second stop will be to lose the eye of Horus and then recover it and meet up again with Seth the lion. Before I start describing the sequence, I wanted to share the second trinity that we're going to run into down at the removal of the eye of Horus and the removal of Seth's testicles. At this line we find an image of a lion on top, and the flip side of that is another image that we can roll, because on the left we see the heart of Isis, and on the right, in focus at the bottom, is a butterfly, and that of course represents Osiris. So we now have an image and a trinity through which we can turn the tables and keep the story flowing. In this sequence, the shadow begins to close in on the light. It's very important to notice in the first couple images that interplay. So where we see light in the forehead of Seth, on the second image that light disappears because it's been consumed. By the third image, though, the light has already begun to open the shadow from the bottom up. This is symbolic of sunrise and sunset. So when we hit the third image, Seth the lion is now in focus, so we simply roll him 180 degrees because he was upside down. And now, on the flip side of that, is Horus. And now Seth has the advantage because he rolled over and he begins to consume the light. So we see the face of Horus begin to distort as the shadow starts to move up from the bottom. At the 10th image, the eye of Horus has been removed, and since there's a trinity on this line, we can roll and turn the tables on the shadow. So now light moves back up the chain, Horus recovers his eye at image 13, and we move up till we get to the line of Seth again, and this time Horus, the light, gets to have his turn. In the next series of the sequence, we see the lion of Seth on top, and because the light has the momentum now, it is splitting the head of Seth open from the top. And we see all kinds of images emerging from this light that is ripping open the head of Seth, images like a Buddha and an angel and other things. And finally, when we get to the bottom, we see the castrated Seth. And because
again, we're at a trinity. We can roll that image over and we see another image of a lion. And this image is now the castrated image of Seth, and the light of Horus has gained the momentum, so now the light is moving in to destroy the shadow. And now, since Seth has been castrated, we are en route to the intervention of Isis.
So here we are at the castrated lion of Seth, and like I said, the light has the momentum, so now the light starts encroaching on the shadow from below. But once we get to image 26, the injury of Horus occurs and he cannot encroach any further. So we roll that image over to the left and we find Seth hiding in the shadows. So we reverse direction and now we move back up the chain and the shadow is moving in on the light, and we come to the castrated lion again. In this final sequence, we see Seth has returned to the castrated lion, flipped over, and found his testicles. So now, moving up the chain, we see the shadow creeping in on the light, and by image 36, the testicles have been recovered because they're past the halfway mark. But on the flip side of that image, Isis has healed her wounded son, and now Horus the warrior is in focus and has the advantage, so he starts to creep in on the shadow. And here's where it gets really interesting, because one more tick on the geometry and we have to roll this image 180 degrees because hiding in the shadows is an image of Seth. And that is really interesting because from the beginning I've been saying that is the Sphinx of Horus, and it turns out I was wrong, but I see you now, you devil you, and I understand what's going on. The light is Horus, the shadow is Seth, and that is the Sphinx of Seth, period. So, at any rate, as the story goes, Seth has the momentum now, so he can't go the other way. He can't go back to the warrior of Horus, because he would lose. So he flips over, and we are back at the beginning. So the face really is a trick of light and shadow. Let's take a moment to examine the images of Horus the warrior at intervention. First, I've highlighted the eyes in yellow on the healed Horus to help everyone see his face. As well, I provided the false color infrared because even though the helmet is distorted because of Dr. Malin's falsified data, the healed face of Horus is still incredibly focused and highlighted, especially the eyes. So clearly, the image on the right is in focus while the image on the left is out of focus, i.e., we have an injured Horus and a healed Horus. Here's what it looks like all put together. Now that we've come back to the beginning, the sequence simply starts all over again. But now we can talk about that image of Ra that gets produced at 19.5 degrees every time we go around. Bear in mind that as we observe our solar system, we consistently find upwellings of energy at 19.5 degrees. On Earth, it's the Hawaiian caldera. Mars, it's Olympus Mons. On Jupiter, there's the red spot, and so on. What I interpret this extra image, this image of Ra, to represent is that upwelling. It's that extra energy that is pouring out than was put in. In other words, Ra simply rolls out of this equation while the system keeps on turning. And that is the foundation of the physics that underpins Cydonia, free energy in abundance for all. Now that you know how I derived the sequence of the Battle of the Face, you can visit my homepage and know exactly what's going on in that spinning image I have posted. So if I'm right about all this, I think it's an understatement to say that nothing in any of our lives will ever be more important than acknowledging this reality for what it is, and it's simply the truth. I think and believe it's time for us to discover our ancient past, experience and act in a reasonable and informed manner regarding our polarized present, and ultimately realize our true potential as a species. My name is Max, and I thank you for taking the time to listen.